Chapter 61, Maester's Fall and Dragon's Rise. Casterly Rock, 294 AC. Jaime watched as Creylen's hand was nothing more than a bloody stump. Ghost hadn't taken it completely, but he had done the next best thing. Now that hand would never be used again. It hardly mattered, though, Creylen wouldn't survive the night. The Maester had screamed louder than any man should, and when Oberyn had burned the stump to stem the blood flow, Creylen had passed out. But they didn't allow him the respite of unconsciousness for long. When they woke him, he looked at them all with hatred, but the laughter that once escaped his lips had vanished for good. "Ghost," Jon said, and the wolf moved forward again. But then Jon shook his head, and the wolf halted a few steps later. "Now you'll tell us everything, every last piece of knowledge you have about what you and your friends have been up to." I will. Please keep the wolf away from me," Creylen cried out. One lie, one omission, and Ghost continues. "This time, I swear he won't stop at just a hand," Jon warned, and Creylen nodded frantically. Oberyn looked at Jon with admiration, while Jenna, despite her rage, showed some concern. Tyrion, however, just stared blankly at the Maester, his own worries torn between his brother and his king. When Jon turned to Tyrion and nodded, he walked over and whispered something in his ear. Tyrion's expression shifted as he absorbed the information. He left the room and approached one of the guards, instructing them to fetch some parchment. It took most of the night for Creylen to reveal his part in the events, their mother's murder, how he had stoked their father's hatred for the dragons. Jaime knew that this only added to his father's own animosity, and ultimately, nothing would have swayed his father's actions. One of the most surprising revelations was that Creylen had destroyed a letter from their mother to their father, a letter accepting a betrothal offer from Oberyn's mother for his marriage to Elia. His other actions in Casterly Rock were more benign, steering. Certain trade disputes were manipulated in a specific way to push his father toward a harsher response. Jaime felt disappointment that the Maester hadn't been present during the Rain and Tarbeck rebellion. He had hoped to lay one of his father's more egregious acts at the Maester's feet. With Tyrion, he had quietly whispered in his father's ear, igniting his disdain and hatred for his brother. Jaime placed a reassuring hand on Tyrion's shoulder when they overheard the comments. Although the Maester wasn't directly involved in the conspiracy to take down the dragons, other than his position at Casterly Rock, he certainly knew some details, much of which was likely speculation based on various events. The pregnancies and the growing animosity toward the dragons throughout the realm had not instigated the plotting of Jon Arryn or others, but they had certainly fueled it, seeking to benefit from the chaos. Their hatred and desire to eliminate Jon's family, particularly the dragons, ran deeper than any of them realized. The shepherd was one of us, a Maester who lost his chain and claimed the faith. He was our man, and the storming of the dragon pit was our finest hour until Duskendale, Creylen said, earning a fierce glare from Jon. "You were involved in Duskendale?" Jon asked. Creylen nodded. Dennis Darklyn was a weak man with an ambitious wife. A few well-placed words from their Maester had her repeating them loudly and, over time, more insistently to her husband. With Tywin as hand, he wouldn't tolerate dissent, and so a plan was formed. "So you plotted to have my grandfather imprisoned?" Jon demanded. Creylen nodded again. "We did more than that. Duskendale broke Ares, but have you ever wondered why he wasn't treated as harshly as most prisoners? Yet he broke there. What did the Maester give him?" Oberyn interjected, and Jaime turned to him, understanding dawning. "I do not know," Creylen admitted. "It worked," Creylen said. "I want the names of everyone involved in this, every single one. Not a single person can be left out," Jon demanded. "I won't give up my brothers, no matter what you threaten me with," Creylen replied, summoning courage from somewhere deep inside. Jon didn't respond, but Ghost did. The direwolf lunged at Creylen, teeth bared and snarling, inches from his face. The effect was immediate, but it also had an unintended consequence. The stench as the man's bowels loosened made Jaime gag. He was surprised none of them ran from the room, even his aunt managed to hold her composure. The names of the maesters meant little to Jaime, and he suspected most of them were low on the hierarchy. There were two archmaesters, one they already knew, Theobald, and the other, Walgrave, the Archmaester of Ravernry. Jaime learned that Walgrave was Waleys's father, demonstrating how these people were willing to use even their own kin to further their agendas. Once the interrogation was complete, Jaime ordered the man to be cleaned up and chained. It was dark outside, and he felt weary. Although he wished to kill Creylen on the spot, he decided to speak to his family and king first. "I'll relay this to Olenna," Jon said as they walked from the cells. "Maybe you should get some rest, Jon." "It's been a hard day," Jenna suggested, and Jon smiled at her. "I will, but this is too important." "We're all in this together, and Olenna will want to know," Jon replied, and his aunt nodded in agreement. "What do you want done with him, nephew?" Oberyn asked. "He dies." "How I leave that up to those he has harmed more than I," Jon said, glancing at Tyrion. "Just kill him." "I care not how it's done, just kill him," Tyrion said, his voice shaky. Jaime looked to Jenna, who nodded her agreement. "Fine. Tomorrow, I'll carry out the sentence," Jaime said. Jon left with Oberyn after exchanging final words. "Good night," Jaime said as he, Jenna, and Tyrion entered his chambers. He immediately poured them some wine, which Tyrion drained in one swift gulp, while Jaime was pleased to see him savor the next glass. They sat in silence for a few moments, each lost in their own thoughts, until Jenna broke the quiet. "Our lives could have been so different, you know. So many people who should be here now, but aren't," she said, sadness lacing her words. "To those who should be here," Jaime replied, raising his glass. "To Mother," Tyrion added. "To Mother." Jaime crept quietly into his room, trying not to disturb her. The illness had come on quickly and unexpectedly, and if it hadn't been for Jenna, he would have been worried and panicked. They had been unable to summon the maester due to his questionable loyalty, and instead had to send for a woman from Lannisport, who had confirmed the grim news. "I can hear you, you know that, right?" she called out, her voice playful. "We weren't exactly trained in stealth," he replied as he quickly undressed. "Gods, you'd be terrible in the wolfswood. Rabbits, hares, deer, they'd all run at the sound of the noisy lion," she chuckled. "They're supposed to hear me roar, after all," he joked, and her laughter rang out as he climbed into bed beside her. She lay on her side, and he wrapped his arms around her from behind, instinctively resting his hand protectively on her stomach. She turned her head to softly kiss his lips, then shifted back to allow him to hold her even tighter. "Did you find out what you needed to know?" she asked. "Some of it." "Gods, Daisy, the things they did, and Creylen wasn't even a big part of it. I shudder to think about what Pycelle knows." "Should something be done about him?" she inquired, but he misunderstood her meaning. "Creylen will die tomorrow." "No, Pycelle. He's around your niece and nephews. Should something be done about him?" "About him?" "Baratheon's children serve their cause. Even if he knew the truth about them, it still helps their cause. As long as the dragons are kept away and the crown appears to have its future secured, they are safe." "Good. How did Jon take it, Tyrion?" "Badly. Tyrion hasn't expressed it yet, but Jon is keeping it inside. He'll release it when he's ready. For now, he's focused on how to stop them. We should let him work through that for a bit longer. Maybe we should tell him." We should. But only when you're ready. Let's deal with this first, Creylen, Tyrion, and Oberyn leaving. Then, if you want, we can tell him." "Have you thought of names?" she asked. "Joanna for a girl," he replied, and she nodded. "For a boy?" "You pick the boy," he said, and she smiled. "I love you, husband," she said, kissing him softly. "I love you too, wife." Olenna and Marjorie had just walked from the cells back to their rooms. Marjorie was concerned about leaving Jon alone, and had the situation been less serious, Olenna would have laughed. Both Jon and her granddaughter had a way of deferring to one another. They sought to comfort and make each other happy. When they finally understood their true feelings for each other, she would dare anyone to try to come between them. "Will Jon be all right, grandmother, dealing with that man?" Marjorie asked. "He will. He has Jaime and Jenna with him, along with Tyrion and Oberyn. He'll be fine, sweetling, I promise." "What they did to his family, he took it hard," Marjorie said sadly. "He told you about it?" Olenna asked, already knowing the answer. "I went to his room after he found out. He was there with Lady Jenna, and he spoke to me about it, all of it." "How could they do such a thing, grandmother? How could they?" Marjorie said, her anger rising. "We'll fix this, Marjorie. We'll fix them all," Olenna assured her, and her granddaughter nodded. "Of Lomaise? We'll need to think about it. Not all of them are the same, my love. We need to find out who is who. Until then, if you're feeling unwell or want to send a message, speak to me before you talk to him. Do you understand?" "I understand," she replied. Olenna pulled her into a tight embrace. Afterward, she walked her back to her rooms and waited until she was settled in bed before leaving. She kissed her softly on the forehead and wished her good night. Once in her own chambers, Olenna sat at her desk, deep in thought about her next steps. The Maesters were just part of the equation. There would be a response from the crown, too. As she considered each potential course of action, she heard a knock at the door. Jon was shown in. Surprised to see him so soon, she realized that she had lost track of time while lost in her thoughts. When Jon sat down, she noticed he looked tired. Although he appeared annoyed and aggravated, he managed to keep his composure. In his hand, he carried a list and handed it to her. Several maesters' names were written down, and a couple immediately caught her attention. Walgrave. There was something about him a few years ago, my king, him and one of the Hightower girls. His son was Whaley's Flowers, the maester at Winterfell who killed my grandmother, Jon replied, and she felt a sense of relief seeing him keep his anger in check. "One of these others is the maester at Horn Hill, Tarly's maester, Arden," she said, and Jon looked at her quizzically. "Why put a maester in Horn Hill? Why not Highgarden?" She paused for a moment, and then it struck her. She recalled how Tarly had always been so prickly around Mace and the way he looked at Willis. Initially, she had attributed that to Ashford and Mace himself, and she thought Tarly's disdain stemmed from his view of weakness. But now, thinking it over, it could be more. Were they possibly sowing the seeds to make him turn his coat? Could they be trying to make him bitter enough that if the timing was right for him to go against her house? "My lady? House Tarly is one of our strongest bannermen, and Randall is always prickly," she replied, before Jon interrupted her. "Ashford," he said, and she smiled. "Indeed. Mace claimed the glory, but it was Randall who won the day. The man has held a grudge ever since." "You think they intend to replace you?" he asked. She shook her head. "It takes a king's will to do that. So unless you have plans to do so, Your Grace," she added, half-jokingly. "Never," Jon replied firmly, and she felt a weight lift that she hadn't even realized she was carrying. Then perhaps they're just fueling discontent, just in case. "We must treat any messages from Horn Hill as if they were going to the Citadel, my lady," he said, and she agreed. She would also keep a closer eye on Randall. Once he knew the truth about Jon, he would be no problem. Whatever ambitions he might have or whatever lack of loyalty he might feel toward her house, he wouldn't feel it toward the dragons. "He's to be executed on the morrow if you wish to attend," Jon said. She nodded. "I wouldn't have Marjorie there, my lady." His voice softened. "She isn't a delicate flower, my king, but I agree, this is not something she needs to see right now. Thank you, my lady, he said as he rose to his feet and moved toward the door. I am happy to have your counsel and your support, Lady Olenna. He turned to say goodbye, and a moment later, he left. It is yours always, my king, she said, meaning every word. Tarly could be a problem if circumstances were different, but with a son of Rhaegar alive, with Arthur in his corner, and with a dragon, Tarly would be happy to serve the dragons once more. But she needed to find out for certain about Lomeis and ensure their communications were not sent by Raven. She was relieved to see Gorman's name wasn't on the list. Still, whether that meant he wasn't involved or that this maester simply didn't know of him gave her pause. She was up. Bright and early the next morning, left and right escorted her to where Jenna awaited. After a nod for them to stay behind, she and Jenna took the lift down to the base of the rock. They walked for what felt like ages. Ahead of her, Jon walked with Arthur and Jors, while behind them, his massive guard carried something covered with a cloth. To her surprise, Ghost was nowhere to be seen. When they reached a door, Jon's giant guard handed the cloth to Jors and stayed behind as they walked through. She noticed the cloth discarded on the ground next to a cage. Looking at Jon, she saw the dragon perched on his shoulder. It appeared to have grown, and Jon seemed to struggle with her weight when she chirped and took to the air, flying ahead of them into the light. The beach they arrived at was completely enclosed, and both Jaime and Tyrion Lannister stood next to the tied-up maester. You're going to burn me. You're just like your grandfather, the maester shouted upon seeing the dragon. I am nothing like my grandfather, maester, and you won't burn today. I wouldn't waste my sister's flames on you, Jon replied. She watched as Rhaenys flew out over the sea and dove beneath the waves, returning moments later with a fish caught in her mouth. They all observed as she tossed the fish into the air, unleashed a flame upon it, and devoured it whole. Then she caught another fish and brought it back to Ghost. It turned out Ghost had been there all along, his paw prints were clear in the sand where he had been running free. Jon looked unhappily as his sister and Wolf played together, Ghost munching on the fish while Rhaenys chirped at the still silent Wolf. A few moments later, when Oberyn arrived, Rhaenys chirped at him as well, and the smile he gave the dragon was even broader than Jon's own. I had worried I would miss this, nephew, Oberyn said, and Jon shook his head. We would have waited, uncle. Lord Jaime, if you're ready, Jon said, turning to hand him the blade that Arthur had been carrying. How? Where? The maester stammered as he looked at Dark Sister. You, maester, have learned your last piece of knowledge, Jon declared as Arthur and Jors dragged the maester to the ground and placed him in front of Jaime. In the name of his grace Jaehaerys Targaryen, the third of his name, king of the Undulls, Rhoynar, and the first men, lord of the Seven Kingdoms and protector of the realm, Lord Jaime Lannister, hand of the king, sentence you to die, Jaime announced, waiting for the maester's last words. You think this is the end of things? You think you can stop us? All of you here, listen well. We've been around for centuries and will be here long after you are all but dust on the wind, Creylen said defiantly. If I need to tear down the citadel brick by brick, if I have to kill every single maester, every acolyte, every man in training, if I have to burn the world down to see you and your kind pay, maester, then I will, Jon replied as Rhaenys chirped in agreement. Fire and blood, maester. Fire and blood, Jon stated, and as the maester looked at him in terror, Margaery saw Jon nod to Jaime. Then the sword fell, severing the maester's head in one swift strike. Their time at Casterly Rock was drawing to a close. In just a few days, it would be Loras's name day, and shortly after that, Jon's. Margaery found herself looking forward to both celebrations, yet also wishing they were further away. While she missed her home and her mother and father, she had enjoyed her time here. She found joy blossoming into a clever young lady, and once Jon had shared stories of the girl's little tricks, she had found them incredibly amusing. Sansa had become even closer to her, despite the age difference. Jon's sister had a maturity that Margaery admired, making their bond all the more special. Marjorie wished she could have a decent conversation with someone. While her cousins often dreamed about knights and upcoming tournaments, she had a simpler way of viewing things, one that reminded her of her talks with Jon. But deep down, she knew the real reason she enjoyed her time here. Jon was making his sister and Joy laugh at his brother's expense. She watched him, a broad smile spreading across her face as his hands moved exaggeratedly and his cheeks puffed up. Before long, she was laughing loudly, just like Sansa and Joy. Loras tried to look annoyed but failed miserably, while Brienne and Creylen paused their sparring to see what was happening. "I do not look like that," she heard Loras protest, his face struggling to suppress a smile. "Loras, you do. We all know you do." "Joy, how does Loras look when he's concentrating?" Jon asked. "Like this," Joy replied, puffing out her cheeks, which made Loras laugh even more. "No, I don't." "Sansa?" Jon prompted, and she too puffed out her cheeks before he turned to Marjorie. "Marjorie?" he asked, raising an eyebrow slightly. Looking between him and her brother, she couldn't resist. She filled her cheeks with air and puffed them out as far as she could, prompting laughter from everyone in the yard. Even Creylen's uncle chuckled along. "See? Everyone thinks so," Jon said, and Loras just shook his head, laughing as he walked away. Jon then moved closer to her, whispering in her ear, "Thanks for playing along, just Marjorie." "You're welcome, just Jon," she replied. They spent the rest of the day doing very little. Jon had the chance to start sparring but chose instead to sit with her while the others faced off. Sansa and Joy went off to their lessons, giving them even more time to be together. As he walked her back to her room so she could prepare for dinner, she sensed that he was feeling the same way she was, that he too was upset that their time together was coming to an end. That night, after dinner, Marjorie found herself sitting in front of her looking-glass, lost in thought. She wondered when she would see Jon and Loras again and how long it would be until their next meeting. The more she pondered, the sadder she became, so she tried to push those thoughts aside. As the days passed and the time drew nearer, she found herself combing her hair in front of the mirror each night, feeling a heaviness in her heart with each passing day. But when she woke up today, excitement bubbled within her. Jon had promised to take them all on a picnic by the river. So, she broke her fast with only a light meal and prepared herself for the day ahead. She met up with her cousins, who were just as eager as she was, and together they made their way to where the horses were already waiting. "Your horse, my lady," Jon said, leading a beautiful pale white horse over to her and assisting her in mounting. "I thank you, kind sir," she replied with a giggle. She glanced around and saw Joy on apples, with Creylen and Sansa riding alongside her. Loras was helping their cousins mount, while Brienne walked beside them, holding the reins of her own horse and Loras's. Seeing he wasn't needed anymore, Jon mounted Winter. He nodded to Daeron and Jors, and they began to ride out. They started slowly, but soon enough, Creylen rode up and challenged Jon to a race, earning an eye roll from Loras. "You don't want to race him, not on Winter." "Just give up now, Creylen," Loras warned, but his words fell on deaf ears. "He can't be that good," Creylen replied, prompting snickers from Loras and Sansa. "Very well, on your own head be it." "Don't say you weren't warned," Loras said with a smirk. Jon looked to Marjorie to make the count. As she reached one, they took off, and it became immediately clear that Creylen was outmatched. Jon's bond with Winter was nearly as strong as it was with Ghost or Rhaenys, he had told her. Watching him now, as he stretched the distance between himself and Creylen, she could see just how true that was. He was clearly a far better rider than the other boy. The way he sat in the saddle and moved was far more natural than learned. "He's the only one who could stand a chance against him," Loras said, drawing her attention to Ghost, who looked forlornly at the departing horses. Given the two smaller wolves at his side, he was right to stay with them. Both Fawn and the black pup had grown large enough to venture outside on their own, but this far from the rock, they stuck close to their bigger brother. "Loras, race." Joy called out, but Loras shook his head before whispering to her, "She's almost as good as he is." "Please, Loras, race." Joy insisted, and Loras nodded with a sigh. Marjorie watched as they set off, and Loras was right again. Joy was a natural. She could hear the girl's laughter as she pulled ahead of her brother. Ser Dayron took off a moment later, and the rest of them looked at Marjorie, as if waiting for her cue. She simply kept riding forward. A few minutes later, Ser Dayron and Jon appeared in the distance. Loras, Creylen, and Joy, a little behind them, stopped and waited. They rode back to her and then escorted her and the others to the river. Jon had been right, it was a beautiful spot. The trees provided shade, and the water flowed slowly enough that you could paddle in it if you wished. After they ate, Marjorie watched as the three wolves played in the water, Ghost splashing the other two, accompanied by growls and laughter. Jon took her for a walk down to the riverbank, and when they reached a shallow area, he helped her across, guiding her to stand on the little rocks that formed a bridge. Ser Dayron walked with them, only a few feet behind. As Jon led her to a hill, he asked her to close her eyes. When he told her to open them, she gazed in wonder. The rock was clear in the distance, and the way the sun hit it made it look almost golden, as if the entire structure was bathed in a warm glow. Joy found this place when we were riding one day. On a day like this, it shines, Jon said, and she couldn't agree more. She watched as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box, handing it to her. Surprised, she wondered why he was giving her a gift. "For your name day. You can open it now if you wish, or keep it for then," he said. She felt a tug of indecision. "I'll wait. That way, when I open it, it'll be as if you were there," she replied. Jon looked at her, a serious expression on his face. "I would be if I could, but I will be in spirit," he said. She smiled as they stood together for a few moments before walking back. That night, lying in bed with Jon's present still unopened in her hand, Joy began to reflect on her name days and the other celebrations she had experienced. Thoughts of feasts, balls, and tournaments filled her mind, and she felt herself drifting off. As she closed her eyes, she remembered the things she had seen while gazing into the glass candle. Suddenly, she jumped up, a smile spreading across her face. A wedding. She had seen a wedding, herself in a beautiful white dress on the day she married. She closed her eyes again, trying to remember the face of the man she was to marry, but to her disappointment, she realized she had not seen him. Yet, as she concentrated, only one face came to mind, the one man she wished to spend her life with. She smiled tightly around his present and, as sleep overtook her, she hoped to dream of being married to Jon. Joy hated her lessons. She despised having to act proper and ladylike, answering questions as Lady Joy Hill rather than simply being Joy. She knew her aunt wanted what was best for her and that she would need to grow out of her childish ways, but it was dull and boring, and she hated it. She much preferred playing with Balerion and spending time with Jon. They understood her, they knew she was still a child. Why couldn't they just let her be a child? "You are a Lady Joy, one day you'll be the Lady of Castamere. It's a great responsibility, and you need to be ready for it," Jenna said. Joy nodded reluctantly. She had tried to play her games here, hoping that with Sansa and Marjorie attending some of her lessons, she would be allowed to enjoy herself. But Jenna had informed the tutors, telling each of her teachers that Joy needed to behave. The Maester had let her play, he didn't seem to care, but he was gone now. The tutors never allowed her to have fun. When she did try, they told her aunt, and even having Balerion scratch at them wasn't enough to make them leave her alone. Her cat was her true friend, along with Jon, Ghost, Loras sometimes, and Marjorie, though she didn't like Marjorie when she took Jon away from her. At first, Joy didn't like Sansa either, but later, seeing Sansa with Fawn and how Jon would speak to both of them, she found herself warming up to her. Fawn was fun, just like the black pup, and even Balerion liked them. But it was the new boy, Creylen, who intrigued her the most. He was different, and Joy realized she liked him almost as much as she liked Jon. She had tried to change his name, but nothing worked. It wasn't like calling Jon Jon or Balerion Balon, that just didn't feel right. So Creylen it remained. He was fun like Jon and talked to her even more than Loras did. He smiled often, and she liked that. "Joy, are you paying attention?" Carly asked. Joy looked at the woman and saw Sansa trying not to smile as she sat beside her. "I am," Joy replied. "A purple unicorn?" Carly prompted. "House Brax, Lord Andros Brax, Lord Tytos is his heir," Joy answered, knowing it annoyed Carly when she answered questions that hadn't been directed at her. "And House Creylen's words?" Carly asked. "None so fierce," Joy replied, and she noticed Carly smile at her. "Burning tree on a smoky field?" Joy asked. "House Marbrand, Lord Demon, Ser Adam is heir, and burning bright are their words," she replied, her boredom evident. "Well done. Perhaps you were paying attention after all," Carly said, and Joy rolled her eyes, prompting a giggle from Sansa. Of course she was paying attention, it was just so dull. She hated it. But Jon had said it was important, and her papa had said the same, so she sat through the lesson, even though she'd much rather be chasing Balerion through the castle or riding apples with Jon, Loras, and Creylen. Creylen enjoyed riding as much as Jon, but he wasn't as busy, which meant Joy and Apples had been able to ride more since Creylen came along. There were so many things she would have preferred doing, but finally, the lesson ended, and Joy couldn't wait to leave. Today was Jon's name day, and she had gotten him a present, something even nicer than what she had given Loras a few days ago for his name day. Loras had liked the coat Jon had helped her pick out for him, but Jon's gift was better. It was a book, just like the ones he read to her, but this one was about dragons. Tyrion had given it to her, and she knew Jon would love it. She had even wrapped it herself, wishing the day would pass more quickly. It felt like an eternity until the feast would begin. "Sans, what did you get Jon?" she asked eagerly. "I made him something," Sansa replied. "A handkerchief?" Joy guessed. "No, something different." "You'll see tonight," Sansa said, looking at her with a smile. "Please, please." Joy pleaded, giving Sansa her best innocent look, the one that usually earned her an extra piece of peach pie when Jon was around. "Gods, you really can't wait, can you?" "Come on then, I'll show you," Sansa said, leading Joy to her room. She walked over to her chest and pulled out the present, revealing a beautiful cloak. It was black with fur on the collar, and white dire wools were embroidered into the straps. It looked both warm and elegant at the same time. "It's beautiful, Sans," Joy said, admiring the cloak. "Thank you. What did you get him?" "Not telling," Joy replied, sticking her tongue out. "Joy," Sansa said, trying to sound stern, but Joy just giggled. "Sans," Joy teased, sticking her tongue out again. Sansa was quicker this time, catching Joy and starting to tickle her. Joy's laughter filled the room, growing louder and louder. I'll tell," she gasped when the tickling became too much. "What did you get him?" Sansa asked, pretending to be angry, and Joy burst into laughter. "Tyrion found me a book about dragons, about the conquest and how Aegon made the Iron Throne," she said, biting her lip as she awaited Sansa's reaction. "Jon will love that. He adores stories about dragons and the Targaryens, especially Daeron and the Dragon Knight," Sansa responded. Joy smiled in relief. If Sansa thought he'd like it, then he definitely would. A little while later, Joy took a nap before Alessia came to wake her and help her get ready for the feast. Balerion scampered around her feet as she yawned herself awake. Marla styled her hair while Alessia picked out her prettiest dress. Once she was ready, Creylen arrived to escort her to the feast, carrying Jon's present in his hands. Balerion didn't scratch him at all, and together, they made their way to the dining room. Before arriving at the Rock, Jon hadn't really celebrated name days. Robb had his celebrations, and even Sansa had one that he remembered, but Jon's own name days had been rather quiet. He would receive gifts during breakfast, then sit with his uncle in the Godswood, and he cherished that time together. Since coming to the Rock, however, Jaime had made a big deal out of it. Joy's, Loras's, and his own name day celebrations were all grand occasions. Loras's celebration just a few days ago had been similar to the one Jon was about to attend. Loras was now 12, while Jon was just 11, but the festivities were no different, a feast and presents. Jon had gotten Loras the suit of armor was exquisite, engraved with roses and polished to a brilliant silver that sparkled in the light. Loras had loved it. Creylen and Brienne had watched with envy, and he knew that alone would make the gift even more meaningful to Loras. Now that the moment had arrived for him, he felt a mix of nerves and excitement. He had spent the day with Rhaenys, allowing Sarella to visit her family. They would be attending the festivities tonight, and he looked forward to seeing them again. Rhaenys seemed content in his company. She and Sarella got along well, but they hadn't made much progress in their conversations, other than Rhaenys learning to express when she was hungry. "You're growing, brother, as am I," Rhaenys said. "Soon it will be time." "Does it scare you, Ray, knowing we may need to go to war?" he asked. "Yes. I worry for those I care about, but for you, I feel fear. I get scared thinking of you getting hurt." "I won't be." "We won't be," he assured her, stroking her neck gently. "Promise me you won't leave me, Jay. Promise me you'll never leave me alone." "I promise, sister." "Where I go, you go." "Where I go, you go," she echoed. "Are you worried about tonight?" "I'm excited, Jay. We'll have a brother soon." "I wish it were Egg," he said, a hint of sadness in his voice. "We'll see Egg one day. All of us, father, mother, Lyanna, one day will be together." "One day," he replied, pulling her into a hug that made her chirp with delight. "Go, brother. Go get your presents," she urged, and he laughed as he left the room. Outside, Walder and Jorah waited for him. Arthur had taken the night off at his request, wanting to spend time with his family and enjoy the celebration. He turned to his two knights, who had taken their vows just a few weeks ago, each forming their houses and declaring their words. "My words are, we run with the wolves," Jorah said as Arthur anointed him with oils. "My words are, like the wall, we stand," he added, full of pride. "Tall," Walder said, looking at the two men with pride. "They truly deserve this honor more than most." Each of them was a true knight, just like the two who had fallen defending him as a babe, and like the two who had died alongside his father. They had earned the white cloak more than anyone else. As they walked down to the dining room, the atmosphere was lively. Though it was a small feast, it was still a celebration, and the room was filled with familiar faces. Oberyn, his daughters, and Illyria were present, along with Arthur, Ashera, and Creylen. Lady Melisandre had come with her guards, even though they would soon leave to prepare for later events. Jerian had arrived that evening, and Jon was glad to see him, though Joy was even more excited, peppering her father with questions. Olenna, Marjorie, and her cousins had also come, although not everyone would stay for the entire night. "Finally, we were going to start without you," Tyrion said with a laugh as he took his seat. The presents came first, and Jon was genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness behind each gift. Jaime and Daisy gifted him an ironwood shield, emblazoned with an image of Ghost so lifelike that he knew if he left it on the ground, Fawn or Dusk would approach it, thinking it was their brother. Loras presented him with an ash bow, longer than most and perfectly crafted. Jon couldn't help but smile, imagining the practice sessions ahead. He was stunned when Oberyn handed him a present, a knife longer and thinner than his own, with a fierce point that Oberyn assured him could pierce armor. Jon had no doubt about that. Creylen's gift was simpler, but the wood carving of Ghost was beautifully done, and knowing that Creylen had crafted it himself made it even more special. Tyrion presented him with a gift from all 3 remaining Lannisters, a silver lockbox, just the right size for letters. Jon thanked them all for their thoughtful gifts. "Jon, present," Joy said, handing him a wrapped book. When he opened it, he was nearly brought to tears. "Thank you, Joy," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you," he said, hugging her tightly as he held the book in his hand, the 3-headed dragon depicted on its cover. Sansa approached next, presenting a magnificent cloak, a testament to her exquisite craftsmanship. "Thank you so much, little sister." "It's beautiful, I love it," he said, and Sansa returned his embrace, wrapping her arms around him. He noticed Margaery nervously making her way toward him, and the gift she presented was incredible. The locket was engraved with a wolf on the front, with "Winter is coming" inscribed beneath it. But it was the dragon on the back that truly captured his attention. There it was, Rhaenys, with its white body and blue wings. Underneath, his house words were elegantly written in red and black, "Fire and blood." "Thank you, Margaery. I shall treasure this always," he whispered in her ear as he held her close in a warm embrace. At that moment, Tyrion chose to signal for the music to begin. Since it was his name day, no one asked him to sing, and instead, they listened while the dishes were prepared. Most of the meals served were his favorites, much to Joy's delight, as they were filled with sweets galore that kept her very happy. He sat and chatted with Margaery and Sansa, showing off his shield to Loras and his bow to Brienne. The girl had been embarrassed for not having a present for Loras, so Jon reassured her, "Next year, we can share presents among all of us, Brienne. Each of us on our name day. By then, we'll have known each other longer, and we'll know what we all wish for." She smiled, visibly relieved. As the night went on, he took Joy to her room, surprised when she asked him to bring Creylen along. Even Loras joined them as he read her a story. He nodded to Walder and Lady Melisandre as they left to prepare, then he made the most of the evening. He danced with Sansa, Margaery, and even Sarella and Tyene at one point. He had to coax Brienne to the dance floor, but in the end, she smiled and laughed, joining in the festivities alongside Creylen and Loras. He danced with her too. Eventually, Sansa went to bed, and they all bid their goodnights. Brienne headed to her room while the others made their way to the lift. Jon walked alongside Olenna and Margaery, with him and Loras escorting them down as if they were returning to their wing. In reality, they had another destination in mind. Olenna had been looking at him strangely for a few days after Creylen's execution, and it took Jon some time to realize why. "My lady," he said, "the things I said to the Maester were meant to hurt him, to cause him pain, to make his last moments as miserable as possible. I did not mean them, nor would I act on them, I swear it." After that, she seemed more relaxed, and Jon made sure to speak to Jaime and the others so they knew it was true as well. Tyrion had actually been disappointed, though it soon became clear that he was still hurt by what they had discovered. When they reached the bottom, they began the long walk outside, and Jon noticed that Melisandre had done her work well. The egg rested atop a pile of stones, what she called the birthing nest, and now it just needed fire and blood for the dragon to rise. The blood would be his own, and he understood that Arthur, Jaime, and Margaery would be upset to see him cut his hand, but it had to be done. As for the fire, she was currently soaring around the small cove, reveling in her freedom. Oberyn and his daughters were watching, with Sarella holding parchment and quill, ready to take notes, though those would be kept under lock and key. Ashera and Creylen observed as Melisandre completed her work. Jaime held Daisy tightly, while Tyrion watched the egg with excitement. Jerian and Jenna glanced between him, the egg, and the dragon flying overhead, and Jon could clearly see the moment they realized what was about to happen. "I wanted you all to be here when this was done," he said, "to witness it for yourselves. Some of you were present when Rhaenys was born, but this will not be like that. Bringing my sister back. Bringing this dragon into the world is something entirely different. It requires more magic, more time, and more blood. This dragon is unique. He glanced at Arthur and Jaime, noticing the relief on their faces. Jaehaerys Targaryen is the prince that was promised, the Lord's chosen, and he will awaken dragons from stone, Melisandre added. Jon caught the uneasy expressions on Oberyn, Olenna, and Marjorie's faces. My mother and father called me the promised prince and said I was prophesied, the Song of Ice and Fire. I am both a wolf and a dragon. R'hllor is the god of fire, while the old gods of the north represent ice. They can choose me all they want, but I will be my own man. I will choose my own faith and my own path, as is the right of everyone, Jon declared, watching as Oberyn nodded and Olenna smiled. He stepped forward, drawing a knife and pressing it to his palm. As he cut his hand, blood dripped over the dragon egg, and he called out for Rhaenys. Dracarys, he commanded, and instantly, the nest and egg ignited, flames catching quickly. He held his hand over the fire, letting more of his blood fall, the flames rising higher and higher. Then, he stepped back and waited. The flames soared into the sky, reaching new heights, and in the blink of an eye, they vanished. Jon focused on the nest and heard it, the dragon's cry echoing in his mind. Father, the bronze dragon called, and Jon bent down to pick it up, placing it on his shoulders. He turned to show the others, witnessing the awe in their expressions. None looked more amazed than Melisandre and her guards, who gazed at the bronze dragon as if it were a gift from their god. Sarella stared in wonder, and Tyrion almost took a step forward. Jon felt the bronze dragon shift in his hands, and then Rhaenys flew close. He introduced her to her brother, and the two dragons chirped, though Jon couldn't understand the bronze's call. Ligeron, Jay said, and the bronze dragon chirped happily at the sound of its name. Oberyn watched in awe. Witnessing the birth of a dragon was a moment he would remember for the rest of his life. The way Jon cradled the creature in his hands, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, was beyond explanation. Yet, amidst the wonder and majesty, one troubling thought lingered in his mind from that night. The Red Priestess was too close to his nephew, far too close, and it worried him. He had resolved to speak with them both, starting with her. Jaime had arranged the meeting, and he now sat in the room, waiting for her arrival. Her guards stood watch outside, and if he sensed any threat to his nephew, he would not hesitate to deal with her and them. He and Tyrion were set to leave the following day, so today was also about saying his goodbyes. Illyria and his daughters were with Sarella, and once he finished here, he planned to speak with Jon and his niece before their family dinner with all his girls. Prince Oberyn, he heard her voice as she entered the room, surprising him, he couldn't recall her coming in. Lady Melisandre, he replied with a polite nod. You wish to speak to me about the prince, she said, and he regarded her with curiosity, wondering how she knew. I do. You believe I may harm him. How do you know? He asked, intrigued. Were it not already clear to me how much people care for my prince, Lawler would have undoubtedly shown me. But I have eyes, I can see. You worry for the prince, but you have nothing to fear from me. I've dealt with your kind before, my lady. I know of the things you do. You think the prince capable of sacrificing to the fire? You think R'hllor would have his chosen behave in such a way? I do not doubt Jon, it is you, my lady, who concerns me, Oberyn replied, and she smiled. You have nothing to fear in relation to me, Prince Oberyn. I serve my lord, and my lord wishes me to serve his chosen. I will offer counsel when asked and support when needed, but he is my prince. He is who my God has chosen, and my life belongs to them both. You would die for Jon? Without question. I would kill for him too, if it were asked of me. As would you not? I would. Then, Prince Oberyn, we are on the same side. He watched the woman leave, feeling no better than when she had entered. She had said many of the right things, but pure devotion could be a dangerous thing. He needed to speak to Jon. So, He left the room and took the lift to the family wing. As he walked to Jon's room, he saw Arthur standing outside. How he felt about the man was still something he didn't want to examine. He blamed Arthur for many things, yet having him there filled him with a sense of confidence that his nephew and niece would be safer with him around. "Is he inside?" Oberyn asked. "He is." "Alone?" "Just him and the dragons," Arthur replied with a smirk. Oberyn knocked and then walked inside. As he entered the room, he couldn't help but chuckle. Jon was lying on the bed, talking to the two dragons. Rhaenys was looking at Ligeron and chirping noisily at the orange dragon, who chirped back just as loudly. "If you both speak together, then how am I supposed to understand?" Jon asked. "I know, but she's your sister," he replied. "Yes, she is bossy." "What?" "You know you are, Ray." "All right, you can play for a few more minutes, but your sister is right. You need to rest." Oberyn watched as the bronze dragon flew in little hops, from the bed to the table, from the table to the chair, and then to Rhaenys's chest, forcing loud chirps from his niece. "He's a child, Ray. Let him play a little," Jon said, and Rhaenys took to the air, flying over to the bronze dragon as they began to chirp at each other again. "Uncle, I'm sorry I didn't see you come in," Jon said, jumping to his feet. "Sorry, nephew. Did I come at a bad time?" "Time? No, uncle. I've just been getting glimpses of how my sister would have behaved if our lives had turned out as they should have," Jon replied, and Rhaenys chirped in response. "See?" he added, and Oberyn laughed. "I'm heading to Old Town tomorrow, Jon. I wanted to speak to you first." "It'll have to be here, uncle. I can't leave them both. It's about Melisandre. Jon, I've dealt with the Red Priests before. I dislike having her this close to you. Her god sent her, uncle, and she helped me with Ligeron. I know that, Jon, but these priests, the things they do, the things they've done. I'm well aware, uncle. I spoke to Thuras, to Arthur and Ashera. They both spent time in their temple in Volantis. I've even read the books. Rhaenys trusts her, and so do I. But she's not my god, uncle. While they can help, they're not for my gods or my priests. I just worry, Jon. Thank you for worrying about me, but I swear there's no need. My gods are the old gods. It's how I was brought up. As king, I need to learn and at least seem to follow the seven. As for the Red Priests and R'hllor, I don't know why they're interested in me, but as long as they follow the rules here, I'll allow them to stay." "As you say, my king," Oberyn said, and Jon laughed. "Not you too. Are you all set for the Maesters?" "I am. We'll speak to Marwyn and find Loamra." "You're sure of this, Luwin?" "I am." "Good. We'll need to prepare for a new Maester. I'll see if Marwyn can help us there." Oberyn replied. "Be safe, uncle. You and Tyrion don't risk yourselves. We'll find these men, but you, Illyria, and Tyrion, you're more important to me than revenge," Jon said, and Oberyn smiled before hugging him. "Have no fear, nephew. I intend to see you crowned, to see the stag and falcon fall, to see our family." "Avenge him," Jon said. "As do I, uncle." Rhaenys flew over, wishing him well and asking him to return before heading back to Dorne. Jon agreed, then turned to Arthur as he left the room. "Watch over him, Arthur. Watch over them both." "I will, my prince," Arthur replied before departing. Jon felt a weight in his heart as the day he had dreaded finally arrived. Each moment drew closer, and with every tick of the clock, he felt his heart grow heavier. The Pinnacle ship was ready and waiting, and the ride from the Rock was scheduled early to catch the tide. Yet, Jon found himself moving slower than ever, almost as if he were trying to fight against time itself. Having Sansa with him, receiving advice from Olenna, getting to know Oberyn, Illyria, and his cousins, he had enjoyed all of it immensely. But the real highlight of his days these past few months had been spending time with Marjorie. Seeing her every day, knowing he could share dinner or just moments with her, had brought him such joy. She had comforted him during his troubles, and being able to talk to her about what was on his mind had been incredibly helpful. Even with so many people around him who could offer support, it was Marjorie he confided in most about what truly bothered him. The thought of her leaving today, knowing it would be moons before he saw her again, cast a shadow over him. Even Rhaenys and Ligeron sensed his mood and felt a pang of sadness. But the hardest realization he faced in the past few weeks was a thought that lingered in his mind, one that had transformed into both a dream and a hope for the future. Ever since dealing with Creylen, it had been there, exciting and terrifying him at the same time. A bastard and a rose, it'll never happen, no matter what you may think. The more he contemplated it, the clearer it became that this was what he truly wanted. One day, he would sit on the throne, and while he had never given it much thought before, he knew he wouldn't be alone. There would be a queen beside him, and Jon knew that queen could only be one person. For him, it could only be Marjorie. The thought lingered in his mind, refusing to fade no matter how hard he tried to push it away. This realization had made some of their moments together more awkward than they should have been. At times, he found himself studying her, noticing details he had previously taken for granted. He had always known she was pretty, but now he was certain she was truly beautiful. That made it difficult for him to look at her sometimes. Hugging her, dancing with her, what once felt so natural now sometimes felt a bit harder, a little uncomfortable, as his mind replaced his friend with a vision of a future queen. Shaking off these thoughts, he made his way to the carriages. Marjorie would ride with her grandmother and Sansa, while Jon would ride Winter. By the time he arrived, they were already ready to go, settled in the carriage, eager to reach the ship on time. The ride to Lannisport went by quickly, far too quickly, and before he knew it, he was standing by the ship. "Be careful, Tyrion," he said, and Tyrion nodded before moving on to say goodbye to his brother. "Jon, I'll see you soon." "Take care of yourself, nephew," Illyria said, wrapping him in a tight hug. He returned the embrace and then turned to Oberyn, before speaking with Olenna as Sansa and Marjorie bid farewell to Loras and Joy. "I look forward to seeing you again, young man." "No doubt we'll have much to discuss when I do," Olenna said, and Jon smiled at her. "I thank you for everything, my lady. I won't forget your kindness or your advice. I'll look after your sister, Jon." "You don't need to worry about her," Olenna assured him, noticing his glance toward Sansa and Marjorie. "I know that, my lady." When Sansa approached, he wasn't surprised to see tears in her eyes. As she started to walk toward him, she broke into a run for the last few feet. "I'll miss you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "So much, big brother." "So much," she said as tears streamed down her face. "And I you, little sister. You're going to love the Reach, Sansa, and they will love you." "We'll write, and I'll come visit as soon as I can, I swear it," he replied, pulling her into a tighter hug. They stood there for a few minutes, Jon fighting to hold back his own tears while Sansa gathered herself. Finally, it was time to say goodbye to Marjorie, and Jon felt his heart race when she approached him. He looked into her eyes, sensing that she was just as eager to speak, yet neither of them could find the words. "I shall miss you, just Jon," she said, wrapping him in a warm embrace that he didn't want to end. "I shall miss you too, just Marjorie." In the end, it was all they said. As he watched the ship sail away, a wave of regret washed over him. He felt like a coward for not telling her everything, for not keeping his promise of no lies between them, no half-truths. But he couldn't bring himself to share the biggest truth of all: she was his future, his hopes and dreams. She was his queen, now and always.